Imagine standing in the cold silence of a cemetery, your heart already heavy with loss, when a small, trembling voice calls you, Daddy. That single word shatters everything you thought you knew about your past, your love, and your future. This is not just a story about grief, it is about secrets buried deep, about the fragile bond between a father and a child, and about the courage it takes to fight for love when the world seems determined to steal it away. Every tear, every heartbeat, every desperate choice leads to a revelation that proves even the darkest pain can open the door to healing. Stay with us, because what happens next will touch your soul in ways you may never forget. Subscribe now to Loss and Healing, and let this journey remind you that love always finds a way. The cemetery was wrapped in winter's breath, a gray hush that seemed to smother every sound except the faint groan of bare branches. The sky hung heavy, almost bruised with clouds, as if nature itself mourned along with him. Alexander West stood like a statue, his tailored coat cutting against the wind, his gloved hand gripping a single white rose. 3 years had passed since the name carved into the stone before him had become more than just letters. Megan West, beloved wife, 1985-2020. He had read those words so many times that they were no longer just engraved in granite, were etched into his very bones. Love remains even when we do not. That was the line beneath her name, one he had chosen himself, but the words still pierced him like glass. He knelt, brushing pine needles from the smooth surface, his fingers trembling with care, as if wiping away dust could somehow erase the reality of her absence. He laid the rose gently, almost reverently, as though the flower might reach her through the soil. To the world, Alexander West was a titan, the brilliant architect of Westlink Technologies, a man who had taken a dream scribbled on notebook paper in a college dorm and transformed it into an empire that stretched across continents. But here, at this grave, all the triumphs meant nothing. A man who could bend markets to his will could not bend grief. Grief simply sat beside him like an uninvited companion, patient and unrelenting. As he rose to his feet, the sharp ache in his chest did not ease.
Where are we going?
He rubbed the back of his neck, a small human gesture in contrast to the sharp angles of his expensive coat. That was when he heard Ita's fragile sound, thin as porcelain, the sound of a sob.
Bluebird.
His head turned sharply. Behind the stone, near the slope that descended toward a weathered bench, there was movement. At first, he thought the wind was playing tricks on him. But then he saw her. A small figure crouched low to the ground. A little girl, no more than 6 years old, her hair a tangled halo of blonde falling over her face. She clutched a threadbare stuffed fox so tightly that the seams looked ready to burst. Her coat hung off her shoulders far too large, sleeves dragging in the dirt, and her shoes were soaked through. She looked like winter itself had tried to swallow her. His heart shifted unexpectedly. For a moment, he was not the grieving husband, but a stranger confronted with something fragile and lost. He stepped forward cautiously, his voice low and careful. "Hey, sweetheart, are you all right?" The girl lifted her head. Her eyes were glassy and rimmed with red, the kind of eyes that had already shed too many tears for someone so small. She did not flinch, but when she spoke, the word she whispered rooted him to the ground. "Daddy." Alexander froze. His breath lodged in his throat, his chest locked tight. Not a metaphorical freeze, but a physical paralysis. Every muscle stiffened as if the world had suddenly turned to ice. "What?" he managed, his voice cracking with disbelief. "Daddy," she repeated, softer this time, but steadier. "She said you would come find me." The world seemed to tilt beneath his feet. He dropped to one knee so his eyes met hers, desperate to anchor himself to reality. "What did you say?" His voice trembled, foreign even to his own ears. "What's your name?" The little girl pressed the fox to her chest as if it could shield her from the cold truth spilling into the air. "Mia," she said simply. His throat closed, his heartbeat thundered in his ears. "And your mother?" he asked, though dread had already coiled in his gut. She clutched the fox tighter. "Meg," she whispered. But she said not to say it too loud. He doesn't like it. Alexander's blood ran cold. Meg. No one had called Megan that except her closest friends and him. It had been a private nickname, a tender relic from college days, from long nights whispering dreams to each other before the world demanded too much from them.
You are
The
sad,
sound of that
my
name
dear,
from the lips of
not
a stranger,
confused.
a child, cut deeper than anything else ever could. Before he could ask another question, a man's voice carried across the cemetery. "There you are." Alexander's head snapped up. A man in a charcoal gray wool coat strode briskly toward them. He was tall, neatly groomed, with wire-rimmed glasses and a polite smile that seemed too polished. His leather gloves gleamed in the dim light. "I am so sorry," he said smoothly, nodding at Alexander. "She tends to wander, part of her grief process. I am her foster guardian." Mia shrank behind the headstone, clutching the fox even tighter. Alexander's jaw tensed. "She was here alone," he said quietly, his tone more accusation than observation. The man chuckled softly, the sound rehearsed. "Yes, well, she has a talent for slipping away. It is difficult to keep track of children who know how to hide." He extended a hand toward Mia. "Come now, Mia, time to go." She did not move. Her wide eyes lifted to Alexander, the same eyes Megan once hate eyes that begged silently for protection. The connection struck him like lightning. He felt an instinct rise in him that he had not expected, primal and undeniable. "She said her mother's name was Meg," Alexander said flatly, watching for the man's reaction. There was the faintest possession brief. It might have gone unnoticed by anyone else, but Alexander caught it. The man recovered quickly. "Ah, she must have meant Maggie, short for Margaret. We had a resident by that name once." His smile stayed in place, but his words felt slippery. Mia did not speak. She only hugged the fox tighter, her silence a shield. The man reached again for her arm, and Alexander felt his chest tighten, his breath sharp. Something about the man's tone, too smooth, too controlled, stirred distrust in him. "She doesn't look like she wants to go," Alexander said firmly. The man's voice sharpened. "Just a fraction. Thank you for looking out for her, Mr. West." The fact that he used Alexander's name unsettled him, as if he had known more than he should. For a moment, Alexander caught a flicker in the man's ice-an edge beneath the politeness. The man tugged gently at Mia's arm. Reluctantly, she rose, her gaze fixed on Alexander. Her lips parted one last time, trembling with fragile certainty. "She said you would come find me," she whispered again. And then, step by reluctant step, she was led away down the path between gravestones. Alexander remained rooted in place, his lungs tight, his heart pounding violently against his ribs. The cemetery was silent once more, but nothing inside him was the same. The rose lay forgotten at the base of the stone, a fragile symbol of the life he had lost. But now, another life fragile, pleading, impossibly connected, had torn open a question he could not ignore. Who was Mia? And why did she call him father? The morning after, Alexander West found himself unable to push the memory from his mind. He had barely slept, pacing his penthouse as the lights of the city flickered beyond glass walls. His coffee machine hummed untouched, his whiskey glass sat half-finished, and his laptop with its endless projections lay unopened. None of it mattered. All he could see was the child's face in the cemetery. The way she had whispered, "Daddy."
This is not right.
The way her eyes Megan's eyeshed pleaded without words. By dawn, he was back at Fairview Memorial Park. The December air cut sharp against his skin, frost clinging to the stone edges, and yet he felt drawn there as if the truth might be waiting among the graves. He retraced his steps to Megan's resting place, the flowers he had left the day before now dusted with frost. He lingered, uncertain of what he hoped to find. Maybe it was logic. Maybe it was proof that yesterday had been a dream. Instead, he heard footsteps. Back so soon, a voice said, roughened with age yet not unkind. Alexander turned to see an older man approaching. His heavy coat hung loosely around his shoulders, a cane supporting his gait. A gray beard spilled across his chest like winter moss, and his eyes, though shadowed, carried warmth. "You must be Mr. West," the man said, extending a gloved hand. "Name's Howard. Groundskeeper here. Been keeping watch over this place longer than I can count." Alexander shook his hand cautiously, uncertain whether to expect answers or simply polite conversation. Howard's gaze shifted to the grave, then toward the birch tree where Alex had seen Mia the day before. "You met her, didn't you?" Howard asked quietly. "The little girl?" Alexander replied, hesitant. Howard's mouth curved into a faint smile, one of knowing rather than amusement. "She comes every Sunday, always in that oversized coat, always clutching that stuffed fox. Sometimes she sits on the bench, sometimes in the grass, but always near this stone. Like it's the only thing holding her world together." Alexander swallowed hard, his throat tightening. "Does she speak to you?" Never, Howard said. Not once. She barely looks at me. But she does something else. Every time she comes, she presses her hand against the name on that stone. He gestured at Megan's headstone, closes her eyes like she's waiting for something, or someone. The image pierced Alexander deeper than he expected. He pictured the child's small hand on Megan's name, as though bridging a gap no one else could understand. Howard hesitated before continuing. She left something behind a couple of weeks ago, thought it might matter someday. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. Found it near the vase. Alexander took it with trembling fingers. It was not paper at all. It was a photograph, worn and faded at the edges. The moment his eyes fell on it, his knees nearly gave out. There she was, Megan lying in a hospital bed, her hair pulled back, her face pale but calm. And in her arms, wrapped in a soft white blanket, was a newborn. Alexander sank onto the cold stone edge of the grave. His hand shook violently as he turned the photograph over. On the back, written in blue pen, were the words, St. Jude Medical, Portland. March 4th, 2019. Mia Megan West. His pulse thundered in his ears. The date? Megan had told him she was at a writer's retreat. She had sent a postcard even. He had dismissed it at the time, too consumed with business meetings to pay much attention. Now that postcard felt like a blade in his chest. Megan with a baby, he whispered, the words scraping his throat raw. Howard watched him quietly, giving space but not retreating. I've buried many souls here, Mr. West. I've seen those they leave behind. That little girl, she's not confused. She's grieving. Whatever story you've been told, it's not the whole of it. Alexander gripped the photo so tightly the edges dug into his palm. The world tilted. His his late wife, who had once whispered dreams of children before infertility, slammed that door. Shuthad stood in a hospital holding a child. A child who now cried at her grave and called him father. She called me daddy, he said hoarsely, as if speaking it aloud would make sense of it. Howard placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. Then maybe there's more to your story than you think. Those words burrowed deep, unsettling the ground beneath every assumption Alexander had lived with. Megan's distance in those final years, the unexplained trips, the quiet resignation he had mistaken for grief, it all began to look different now. When he finally pulled himself to his feet, the photograph clutched in his hand like a lifeline, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He could not stay still. Back in his car, he opened his phone, typing with a desperation he had never felt, even in the highest stakes negotiations. St. Jude Medical, Portland. 4 hours away. A hospital where Megan had walked in under another name, delivered a child, and left behind a secret that had now risen from the grave. As the engine roared to life, her words replayed in his mind through Mia's trembling voice. She said, "You would come find me." It was not coincidence. It was not confusion. It was a message. And Alexander West, a man who had conquered boardrooms and entire industries, now faced the greatest and most fragile mission of his life. He was going to find the truth, whatever it cost. The drive to Portland stretched before him like a sentence he could not escape. 4 hours of highway blurred past his windshield, but Alexander hardly noticed the towns, the green signs, the distant mountains. His mind replayed the photograph over and over again. Megan in that hospital bed, tired but radiant, holding a newborn. His daughter, their daughter, the name written on the back Mia Megan West had, carved itself into his heart, each letter heavier than any business deal, any corporate battle he had ever fought. By the time he reached St. Jude Medical, the sun had already dipped low, casting the building in a pale green glow that made its walls look sterile and unwelcoming. Alexander had shed his identity as CEO for something humbler. He wore a simple gray coat, plain glasses, and carried a forged badge that identified him as Andrew Blake, a legal assistant conducting genealogical research. The man who once commanded boardrooms now slipped into the role of a stranger, driven not by ambition but by desperation. Inside, the hospital hummed with quiet order. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman named Kelly, looked up with a polite smile. "May I help you?" Alexander steadied his voice, though his heart raced. "I am trying to confirm a patient record from 2019. The name might have been Megan or possibly Margaret Wells. Birth date January 12th. 1985. I believe she delivered a child here in March of that year. Kelly's fingers paused over the keyboard. She glanced at him, her expression cautious. Are you family? No, Alexander said quickly, the lie bitter on his tongue. This is for a confidential inheritance search. I do not need medical records, only confirmation of admittance. She hesitated, then leaned back. I will check. The seconds stretched like hours. Alexander stood rigid, every nerve screaming that someone would expose him. He imagined guards descending, the forged badge stripped from him, his last chance at truth collapsing. But then, from behind, a quiet voice spoke. You are not the first one looking for her. He turned sharply. A woman in blue scrubs stood near the hallway, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes tired but gentle. Her badge read Dr. Daniels. She tilted her head toward him. Come with me. Alexander followed her through a narrow corridor into a small office lined with paper files. The space smelled of dust and disinfectant. She gestured for him to sit. I remember her, Dr. Daniels began, lowering herself into the chair across from him. She signed in under the name Margaret Wells, quiet woman kept to herself, gave birth here in March 2019, a little girl. Alexander's chest tightened as though his ribs could no longer contain his heart. She had no emergency contact, no family listed, no father's name, Daniels continued. Said it was safer that way. Her gaze softened. The child had your eyes. I remember thinking it was unusual, how much she resembled someone who was not even there. Alexander blinked hard, struggling for words. I asked her once, off the record, why she was alone. She told me, he must never know. If he does, she will not be safe. She seemed afraid, but not of the man I expected her to be. Alexander's voice was a whisper. Did she mention a name? Only initials. HC. Nothing more. But when she was discharged, she asked for a list of private shelters. Not the usual ones for domestic abuse. She wanted places that stayed invisible, off the grid. Bright Horizons was the one she chose. Alexander felt the ground tilt beneath him again. Bright Horizons. The name echoed like a warning bell. That night, he sat alone in his hotel room, the city lights casting fractured shadows on the walls. He stared at the photograph of Megan holding the baby, tracing the outline of her face with his finger. Why did you hide this from me? He whispered into the silence. His laptop glowed with the website of Bright Horizons. Pastel colors, smiling children in stock photos, cheerful slogans about hope and new beginnings. But halfway down the page, a name struck him like a blow. Harold Cray, executive director. Alexander's hands clenched into fists. The same man he had seen in the cemetery. The same smooth voice, the same forced smile. The man who had taken Mia's hand and walked her away from him. The next morning, he dressed carefully, not as a billionaire CEO, but as an ordinary visitor. A navy sweater, jeans, plain shoes. He adjusted the glasses on his face and forced calm into his stride. Bright Horizons sat at the edge of a quiet residential street. Its painted sign was welcoming, its walls decorated with children's drawings and colorful affirmations. Every child matters. Hope begins here. Yet the silence was unnatural. No laughter echoed in the halls, no clatter of playful feet. It was too clean, too controlled. A receptionist greeted him warmly, asking him to wait in a lounge filled with soft chairs and neatly stacked toys. Minutes later, Harold Cray entered. His gray coat was immaculate. His polished shoes gleamed, his expression unreadable. Mr. Blake, is it? He asked smoothly. Always happy to meet potential supporters. Alexander forced a polite smile.
You could.
Your reputation is impressive. Cray gestured for a tour. The halls were lined with doors, each leading to rooms where children sat quietly, coloring or staring into space. Too quiet, too still. When they passed a window, Alexander's heart stopped. Mia sat at a small table, her hair brushed, her stuffed fox beside her. She wore a yellow jumper, pink socks, her little hands moving crayons across paper. She is a quiet one, Cray said almost fondly. Her mother passed, no next of kin, legally under our care now. No father? Alexander asked, his tone forced casual. Cray shook his head. None listed. But Alexander's heart roared inside him. He wanted to break the glass, to scoop her into his arms, to tell her she was safe. Instead, he swallowed his rage and kept walking, each step heavier than the last. Before he left, he asked to review an intake form. Cray obliged, producing a locked file. Inside was a guardianship authorization document. The name leapt from the page, Mia Megan West, signed by Margaret Wells. Dated June 11, 2023, weeks before Megan's death. Alexander's breath faltered. The handwriting was wrong, too precise. Megan's hand had always carried a subtle softness, a slant that revealed her soul. This signature was a copy, mechanical, rehearsed. She was very clear. Cray said smoothly, "She trusted us to care for her child." Alexander nodded stiffly, masking the fury that boiled inside him. He thanked Cray and left the building, but the moment he stepped outside, he gasped for air, as though he had been suffocating. That night, alone in his car, he stared at his reflection in the darkened screen of his phone. He had entered Bright Horizons as a stranger. He left as something else entirely. A father who had just seen his stolen daughter. And nothing in the world, not forged papers, not polished lies, not Harold Cray was going to keep her from him again. The night wrapped around him like a shroud as Alexander West crouched behind a row of hedges near the rear of Bright Horizons. The cold pressed into his bones, but he ignored it. He had not slept properly in days. His mind spun with fragments of forged signatures, the hollow eyes of children, and above all, the sound of Mia's voice calling him Daddy. Now every move he made felt like stepping across a razor's edge. It was 2:10 in the morning. He had studied the patterns. 2 guards rotated every hour. One patrolled lazily, barely awake. The other lingered near the front entrance. The rear wing, the records room, and administration offices remained dark and unstaffed during shift changes. Cameras moved on fixed arcs. He had charted them with the precision of a strategist, timing every sweep. Alexander was no stranger to risk. In his early days, before Westlink became a tech empire, he had written code to bypass security systems simply for the challenge. Now, he used those instincts not to win contracts but to save a child. His child. With a custom wire tool, he picked the outdated padlock on the service gate. The metal clicked softly, and he slipped through. Inside, the utility corridor smelled faintly of disinfectant and old paint. His footsteps were silent, his breath controlled. The shadows became his allies as he matched each step to the rhythm of the sweeping cameras. The door to the records room appeared ahead. Its keypad was a relic, mechanical and unassuming. Alexander pulled a small flashlight with a red filter, illuminating the numbers. 4 digits were worn down more than the rest. 2, 4, 6, 9. He calculated permutations in seconds. His third attempt unlocked the door. The room greeted him with the musty scent of paper and plastic. File cabinets lined every wall, rows of drawers containing the lives of children who had been tucked away, forgotten, or erased. He scanned the labels until he found it Drawer Oak 42. His pulse raced. He pulled it open. Inside was Mia's file. He flipped through quickly, his hands trembling as page after page revealed a grotesque lie. A forged guardianship form, a psychiatric report declaring Megan emotionally unstable, a fabricated child neglect assessment claiming Mia had suffered prolonged abuse. None of the documents bore legitimate seals or signatures from professionals. They were theater designed to look official while masking theft. Then his eyes fell on the final page. Placement recommendation. Section 11F. Transfer to Morocco. Approved by an organization he had never heard of. His stomach dropped. They were not simply housing children, they were exporting them. His eyes darted to the adjacent drawer exfam. He pulled it open. Dozens of files, each belonging to a child ages 3 to 9. Parent status, deceased or unknown. Guardianship, Harold Cray, or one of his associates. At the bottom of each file was a destination. Czech Republic, El Salvador, Tunisia. Stamped logos from obscure nonprofits, paper organizations that existed only on letterheads. No court orders, no family checks, no oversight. It was a machine disguised as kindness. Alexander's throat tightened with rage. He pulled out his phone, snapping photo after photo, full-page images, signatures, logos, stamps. He scanned a QR timestamp with his camera, embedding metadata into every picture. Each click was a small act of defiance. Each captured page a weapon against the darkness. And then a sound. A footstep outside the door. He froze, his heart pounding in his ears. Light flickered in the hallway. A shadow crossed the glass pane. Alexander slipped into a narrow storage closet, pressing himself against the wall, breath shallow. The door handle rattled once, then stilled. Seconds dragged like hours. Finally, the footsteps receded. When silence returned, he eased the closet door open. Clear! He retraced his path with meticulous care, his body humming with adrenaline. Past the utility corridor, through the service gate, over the fence. Only when his boots touched the asphalt did he release the breath he had been holding. Inside his car, his hands shook as he uploaded every image. One copy to Clara, his legal confidant. Another to Issa Monroe, the investigative journalist he trusted. A third to a secure FBI tip line. He typed a message to Issa. "Tonight, the truth walked out with me. Are you ready to tell it?" By noon the next day, the story had exploded across the internet. Headlines blazed, "Orphans for export, the hidden network behind Bright Horizons." 3 major news outlets ran it simultaneously. Over 200,000 shares within hours. Screenshots of falsified documents circled in red, Mia's file included. The forged guardianship authorization exposed, metadata stamped across each photo, undeniable. Social media surged with outrage. Hashtags lit up timelines. M Mile West, not for sale, Bright Horrors. Public pressure mounted with the force of an avalanche. State officials had no choice but to open an investigation before the day ended. Cray responded quickly with a statement, denying everything. He called the evidence fabricated, the accusations slanderous. He spoke of charity and misunderstood intentions. But the world had already seen too much. His polished words could not cover the cracks that Alexander had torn open. That evening, Alexander returned to his penthouse for the first time in days. The space felt hollow, foreign, as though it belonged to a man he no longer was. The stainless steel counters gleamed, the glass walls reflected the city lights, but all of it felt irrelevant. Stock prices, market shares, prestige, none of it mattered anymore. He stood in the kitchen staring at the kettle on the stove when the doorbell rang. His pulse spiked. No one should have known he was back. He approached slowly, his hand tightening around the handle before he opened the door. There she was, Mia. Soaked from rain, her blonde hair plastered to her forehead, her stuffed fox clutched tightly in her arms. Her shoes left small puddles on the marble floor. She looked up at him, her lips trembling. She whispered, her voice shaking, "He said if I ever ran again, you would know what to do." Then she collapsed into his arms. Alexander caught her before she fell. She was trembling, but alive, real. His chest heaved as he pulled her close, closing the door behind them with his foot. The storm outside roared, but inside he held his daughter. For the first time, he felt the fragile but unshakable truth settle into place. She was home, and nothing, no forged papers, no courtroom maneuvers, no Harold Cray was ever going to take her from him again. The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and tension. Alexander West sat motionless in the waiting room, his suit tailored to perfection, but his spirit hollow beneath it. His hands folded tightly in his lap, his gaze fixed on the floor, as if the tiles themselves held answers. 6 days had passed since Mia had collapsed into his arms on that rain-soaked night. 6 days since the fragile weight of her body had rewritten his life. Now the fight to keep her was about to unfold in the cold air of a courtroom. Across the hall, behind brass-etched doors, the case was being prepared. Alexander James West versus Harold Cray. The charge is unlawful custody, document forgery, systemic abuse of guardianship hung heavy in the air. Every detail of his life as a businessman had prepared him for conflict, but nothing could have readied him for this. This was not about quarterly reports or shareholders. This was about his daughter. Clara sat beside him, her heels tapping softly against the tile, her briefcase packed with affidavits, forensic handwriting analyses, child welfare correspondence all sharpened into weapons for this battle. She was calm, steady, her confidence a lifeline. She glanced at him once, her eyes firm. "We have the truth," she whispered. "That is enough." Cray had arrived earlier, flanked by 2 attorneys and a public relations manager. His suit was sharp, his smile polished, his charm intact. He posed for reporters as though this were merely another scandal he would smooth away with the right words and the right donations.
Want some?
But Alexander had seen beneath the mask. He knew the cruelty that lurked behind the glasses, the cold calculation behind that smile. Inside the courtroom, the judge entered, a woman in her 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a voice like steel. She opened with a single line that set the tone, "Let us deal with facts, not fear." The arguments began like blades clashing. Cray's attorney painted Alexander as a wealthy opportunist, a man chasing redemption after abandoning his wife and the child she had borne in secret. "He is a billionaire," the lawyer declared, used to taking what he wants when it suits him. He had no contact with this child until it became convenient for his conscience.
Thank you.
Alexander's fists clenched beneath the table, but his expression remained still. He could not afford anger now. When Clara stood, the room shifted. Her voice was steady, deliberate. "My client is not here for redemption," she said. "He is here because his daughter was stolen. The mother of his child listed him on the birth certificate. That record was hidden, replaced with forged documents that stripped him of his rights. We are not here to argue potential. We are here to argue proof." The first evidence was laid bare, the guardianship papers with the forged signature. A handwriting expert testified with 99% certainty that the document was fraudulent, the signature a crude mimic of Megan's real hand. Then came metadata from Alexander's covert photographs, showing drawers of files Cray had never declared, stamped with destinations far from Oregon. Isa Monroe, the journalist, testified next. She described the photographs Alexander had shared with her, the files marked for transfer overseas, the silence of the children she had seen. Her voice never wavered as she ended with a single line that echoed in the chamber. "No one who hides children on paper can be trusted to care for them in person." But it was Dr. Carol Daniels who brought the room to a hush. The judge leaned forward as the physician, her credentials impeccable, took the stand. Her voice carried the weight of memory. "I was there the day Megan West delivered her baby. I watched her hold her daughter. I asked her why she had not listed the father. She said, 'He let me go so I could heal. But I am naming him on the birth certificate anyway, because no matter what, Mia deserves to know she was wanted.'" The words fell into the courtroom like a stone into still water, sending ripples through every heart. Cray's lawyer tried to tear her testimony apart, questioning memory, suggesting bias, but the damage was done. The truth had found a voice. The judge called a recess. Alexander stepped into the corridor, his body trembling with a mixture of fear and fragile hope. In a small conference room, he found Mia sitting cross-legged on the floor, coloring quietly. Her stuffed fox sat beside her. She looked up as he entered. "Are we leaving again?" she asked softly.
It will be okay,
"Not
I
yet,"
promise.
Alexander said, kneeling beside her. "But soon." She returned her gaze to her drawing. A sun, a lake, and two figures sun tall with messy hair, one small in a yellow dress. "That's us," she whispered. "At Mommy's house." His throat thickened. "You remember that place?" She nodded. She said the lake made the stars feel closer. The recess ended and the case pressed forward. More documents were scrutinized, more lies peeled back layer by layer. Cray sat in silence, his expression tightening as each witness dismantled the facade he had built. When the gavel finally struck at the end of the day, Alexander knew the outcome was not yet sealed. The legal battle was far from over. But a shift had occurred. The truth had broken through. That night, back in Seattle, Alexander prepared the only way he knew how. He painted a room sky blue with white trim, hung paper stars from the ceiling, and placed a nightlight shaped like a fox on the bedside table. He read medical files, scheduled appointments, researched trauma therapy. He began building a world where Mia could heal. At the lake house Megan had once loved, he repaired broken railings, sanded the porch, replaced shattered wind chimes. He scrubbed every corner as though he were scrubbing away guilt, as though preparing a home not just for a child, but for redemption. One evening, as they folded laundry together, Mia held up a small pink sock. Her voice was tentative. "Are you going to leave too?" Alexander froze, then gathered her gently into his lap. "No," he whispered against her hair. "Not in this lifetime, sweetheart." She leaned back against his chest, exhaling with the kind of trust only a child can give. And for the first time, Alexander felt the ground steady beneath him. The court battle would continue, storms still lay ahead, but here, in this quiet moment, he knew one truth with absolute certainty. He was not just fighting for her, he was already hers. Spring crept quietly into Oregon that year, as if uncertain whether it was truly safe to bloom. The trees unfurled their leaves slowly, cautiously, but in a house tucked by the edge of a lake, life stirred back to color. For Alexander West, the silence of his home was no longer hollow. It was filled with laughter, the shuffle of small feet across hardwood floors, the rustle of drawings taped to the refrigerator. Mia ran barefoot through the yard, a crown of dandelions balanced on her golden hair, a popsicle clutched in her hand. Her giggle carried across the water, bright and unrestrained. Alexander chased her with a towel in one hand, his other shielding his eyes from the sun. "You are too fast for me," he gasped. She turned, grinning, her small teeth shining.
You got me.
"You are not old, Daddy. You are just big." The sound of his own laughter startled him. It had been years since joy had risen so freely, so unguarded. For so long his life had been measured in contracts and deadlines, in victories that always demanded more. But here, on the sunlit grass, he discovered a victory that mattered more than any empire. Later, as the sun painted the lake gold, they sat together on the dock.
Cheers.
Mia rested her head on his shoulder, her legs dangling over the water. The breeze stirred the crown of flowers she still wore. From her small backpack, she pulled out a folded piece of paper. "I made something," she said shyly, handing it to him. He unfolded it carefully. A drawing, bright and simple. 3 stick figures stood beneath a yellow sun. A tall man in blue, a little girl with flowers in her hair, and beside them, a woman in a green dress with stars above her head. Above the picture were 3 words written in purple crayon. "Mommy, me." "Daddy." Alexander's throat closed. He stared at the drawing, unable to speak. Mia whispered, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I know she is not here, but maybe she can still see us." He wrapped an arm around her and pulled her closer. "I think so too," he said softly. That weekend, they returned to Fairview Memorial Park. Mia skipped down the path, her stuffed fox tucked under one arm, a bouquet of wildflowers in her other hand. She knelt at Megan's grave, arranging the flowers carefully. "We brought her home," she said, her voice certain.
Oh my God,
Alexander
we're so
stood behind her, his hands deep in his pockets, blinking up at the sky.
I know,
"I hope you are proud," he murmured. "She is everything good you ever were." At home, their refrigerator became a gallery of memories. On one side, a photograph of Megan laughing in a field, her hair wild in the wind. Beside it, a photo of Alexander and Mia on the courthouse steps, her missing front teeth showing in a wide grin, his tie crooked, both of them radiant with triumph. The house itself transformed. Once empty shelves now overflowed with books and stuffed animals. Clay figures Mia had shaped in art class lined the windowsill. Some nights, Mia woke from dreams that left her shaking and silent. Alexander was always there within moments, his hand closing around hers. He never asked her to explain. He never told her to be brave. Instead, he whispered the only words that mattered. "I am here. You are safe. Go back to sleep, sunshine." And she always did. He learned to braid her hair, clumsy at first, too tight or lopsided, but she giggled every time. He wrote small notes on napkins in her lunchbox, sometimes encouragement, sometimes a promise of waffles for dinner. He stopped answering work calls after 5. He stopped chasing the endless demands of the market. His new investments were in swings hung from sturdy beams, in bedtime stories told twice, in the quiet certainty of presence. The lake house became their sanctuary. Alexander restored it slowly, sanding the porch railing, repainting the walls, fixing what time had broken.
So good.
The faint scent of lavender lingered in the window frames, a trace of Megan. It felt like she had left the house not as an escape, but as a gift waiting to be claimed. One evening, Mia sat beside him on the porch, watching fireflies blink across the dusk.
This is a good place.
Her voice was soft,
It is. I like
thoughtful.
the atmosphere.
"Do you think the stars are doors?" He looked down at her, surprised. "Doors? Maybe Mommy walks through them sometimes to check on us." His chest ached, but he smiled, pulling her closer. If anyone could, it would be her. She nodded, satisfied, and leaned her head against his arm. They sat in silence, the night air gentle around them. Later, as the house settled into sleep, Alexander stood in the doorway of Mia's room. The nightlight, shaped like a fox, glowed softly, casting shadows that no longer frightened her. He watched her chest rise and fall, steady and calm. For the first time since Megan's death, the quiet did not feel like emptiness. It felt like peace. He whispered into the stillness, words meant only for Megan, wherever she might be.
Yes.
She said you would come find her. And I did. I always will. The wind rustled the trees outside, the stars blinked above, and in that house stitched from sorrow and second chances, Alexander and Mia found something neither had dared to believe in again: a home. Grief has a way of hollowing out the soul, of convincing us that what is broken can never be made whole again. For Alexander West, the loss of his wife had seemed like the final blow, an emptiness no amount of success or wealth could fill. Yet within that silence, a fragile voice called him back to life. A child's whisper, a word that cut through the shadows. Daddy. What began as sorrow in a cemetery became a journey of revelation, of uncovering truths hidden in shadows and lies woven into official records. Alexander learned that love does not always come wrapped in certainty. Sometimes it arrives as a question, trembling and small, asking only to be seen and held. In finding Mia, he did not just discover a daughter. He discovered himself the father he had never been allowed to be. The man who could stand in the ruins of loss and build something new. Healing did not come in a single triumphant moment. It came in small things. Laughter on a summer lawn, the soft weight of a child leaning against his shoulder, whispered promises in the dark. It came in the courage to show up every day, to face nightmares with patience and mornings with hope. It came in choosing presence over power, love over ambition. The story of Alexander and Mia is not only about a man who fought to reclaim his child, it is about the resilience of love itself. It reminds us that even when life seems merciless, when loss has carved deep scars into our hearts, there remains the possibility of a second chance. Love, when chosen again and again, becomes stronger than any grief. Perhaps you have felt that same ache, the weight of something or someone lost, the fear that the wound will never close. This story stands as proof that while pain may shape us, it does not have to define us. That even in the most broken places, we can begin again. If their journey touched your heart, let it remind you of the power within your own. Every sunrise is a chance to rebuild, every moment a chance to hold closer the people who matter most. Do not let the weight of yesterday steal the hope of tomorrow. Here, on this channel, we share stories that honor both loss and healing stories that remind us we are not alone in our struggles, and that even the darkest nights can give way to dawn. If this story moved you, please subscribe to Loss and Healing. Join a community where we celebrate resilience, compassion, and the courage to love again. Because in the end, love does not erase. The scarce it turns them into reminders of how far we have come. And like Alexander and Mia, we too can find our way home.